Board Member Dyer?
Here.
Board Member Goodhue?
Here.
Vice Chair Hall?
Here.
Board Member Pomeroy?
Here. All right, let's have the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Public appearances. Anyone who'd like to make any comments on items that are not on the agenda at this time?
Quote again.
Catherine.
Good afternoon, members of the Historic Resources Board. Catherine Gualtieri. A few months ago, I came to talk to you a little bit about the 100th birthday party for Hugh Comstock that is being studied and hopefully organized. And I wanted to mention to you something that I had made a mistake on last time, and I found this fortune cookie in my Chinese restaurant luncheon plate yesterday, which said, keep your ideas flexible, but your options open. And so I realized I better come and tell you that I was using, when I talked about the 100th anniversary of Hansel, I was using the old original 1974 copy of Joanne Mathewson's book on Comstock's cottages. Lo and behold, in her 2002 second printing, she made this comment. In March of 1925, permit 924 on lot 10, block 60, the most animated of all the fairy tale cottages was built for $400. The tiny structure, perfect in every detail, is the very cottage that launched Hugh Comstock as Carmel's builder of dreams. And then she goes on to say, it is appropriate that on this page of my new version of the fairy tale cottages of Carmel, I make an apology to each of you that read my first book that I published in 1974. I do stand corrected. I stated that Hansel, this house, was the first that Hugh and Mayada built. No, it was not. It wasn't until I saw the original Comstock drawings that I realized a couple of the houses and building permits were not in the correct order. This new book hopefully will set the record straight on when these early Comstocks were in fact constructed. So I think all of us have to remember that, and I especially, since I'm the one who stood up and said, oh, it's the 100th anniversary of Hugh Comstock's first cottage. So it was true that Gretel preceded Hansel. And after they moved in there, I heard that the owners of Hansel and Gretel I had an interview with them not too long ago, and they said that Hugh would take a shower outside and Mayada would just take a sponge bath because of the limitations in Gretel, the original cottage. And then while they were living there, they were building Hansel. So I guess we should call them Gretel and Hansel, which doesn't sound right, does it? So that's my report, and I hope that we can keep the record straight as we go forward and recognize Hugh Comstock. Thank you.
But we're still on for a 100th anniversary. Okay. Okay. Thank you, Catherine. Anyone else in the gallery? Anyone online?
Not seeing anyone online.
Okay. Then announcements? No,
I can
no
make a few,
announcements.
I guess, I would, going back to the Comstock celebration, I just wanted to let the board know that there was a meeting with Bobby and Mike Voris and Brian Congleton, the architect, and members of Carmel Heritage, and I attended, I think Catherine attended, and the Vorises are really enthusiastic about creating a celebration of Comstock and celebrating the 100th birthday and anniversary of Gretel. and the 99th of Hansel. And so tentatively, this has not been firmed up, but they're tentatively looking at a Friday, July 12th as a kind of an invitation-only fundraiser at the property. And then on Saturday, July 3rd, they're looking at doing a public lecture and talk by Brian Congleton and Bobby Voris as well, probably at the Carmel Women's Club to talk about Comstock and the history of those cottages. And then on Sunday would be the more general public tour, July the 14th, where most members of the public would be allowed to go through the house for a nominal fee. So that's
when you said July 3rd, did you mean July 13th?
July 13th.
Yeah.
Yes. So
12th, 13th, 14th.
And that's still tentative. That you might as well mark your calendars, at least pencil it in.
Okay.
And then
A fundraiser for?
Carmel Heritage Society.
Okay.
And I can also mention for the AIA Monterey Bay, we're organized a talk partnering with the Monterey Museum of Art that's set for May 11th on the work and life of Mickey Munich, the great Big Sur architect. So that should be great. It's at La Mirada. It'll be part of a garden party, and so look out for that in your emails.
All right. Thank you. Anyone else? All right. Orders of business, historic context statement, phase 1 monthly update.
Good afternoon, board. Catherine Wallace. I think I said phase 2. I hope I did, because the context statement is going through a phase 2 update. If anyone attended last month, that's where we introduced the project, and I'd encourage anyone listening to go back and watch the presentation from last month's meeting on March 18th, where we gave more of a rundown on the historic context statement and why it needs to be updated again and what this update will entail. This month, they're really just getting going. Past consultants, Seth Bergstein and being assisted by Kent Seavey. So Seth, Kent, myself, and Eric Dyer met this month. Eric's kind of the liaison between the board, staff, and the consultant, and we were just hashing out different ways to approach this project, which is tricky because we have such an old document that's so lengthy, and how do we take what's there and bring what we need to forward and leave what we no longer need. So there's still a few approaches that the consultant is considering, and we'll come back to you with a decision. No decisions asked of you this evening, but the consultant is proposing either potentially retiring our historic context statement and pulling much of it into a new, fresh document, or potentially doing a volume 1, volume 2 approach, where there'll be a new volume 1 with all the architectural styles we've been discussing, the chronological chapters, the character-defining features, evaluative criteria, and then leaving what we have now as kind of a volume 2 if people want to explore the history more in depth. Or do we treat our current historic context statement as an appendix? So the consultant hasn't settled on anything. We'll come back to you when we have more of a proposal. They're also working on going through what styles we need to really focus on from the early decades of the 20th century, and seeing if there's any that we're missing and which need more attention, vernacular potentially being one of them. And I think that's about it, unless you had anything more, Eric. They're hoping to come back to the board next month with some product to put in front of you.
Mm-hmm. I think you said it very well, Catherine. I have nothing to add.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. So we move on to public hearings. HE 23-209 Rodriguez, consideration of a determination to list the J. Henry Olaf House located at Camino Real 4 northwest of 11th Avenue on the Carmel Inventory of Historic Resources. Director's report.
All right, I'll be presenting this item as well. The Rodriguez property, located at Camino Real 4 northwest of 11th Avenue, And this evening, the board is asked to consider a determination to list the J. Henry Olaf House on the Carmel inventory. Some brief background. The city conducted what we call the Phase 1 initial review last summer in July, and the city contracted consultant did determine that there was enough evidence that warranted an intensive evaluation due to association with Ernest Bixler and Miles Bain, two of our local master builders. And so when that happens, when we can't make a decision initially, the code requires the city to upgrade the evaluation to what we call the Phase 1 intensive. So that occurred in August, and again, the city consultant determined that the J. Henry Olaf House does represent the theme of architectural development, specifically Tudor revival. It does retain substantial integrity. It's over 50 years old, and it meets California Register Criterion 3 because it is a Tudor revival cottage designed by Ernest Bixler and then rebuilt by Miles Bain. That's what brings us here this evening. The board is asked to review the DPR form, the staff analysis, and then applicant-sponsored second opinions by architectural historian Dr. Anthony Kirk, and then a peer review by Kent Seavey to determine whether or not to add the property to the inventory. So this Tudor revival cottage was built in 1933 by Ernest Bixler, as I mentioned. There was a substantial fire that didn't burn the cottage to the ground, but it was basically rebuilt in 1940 by Miles Bain to the original design. And Bain also added a small rear addition just 1 year later in 1941. The original owners were J. Henry Olaf and his wife Dorothy. The Olafs used this property as a vacation home, and we did not find evidence that this home would be significant because of association with the Olafs. The DPR form states that the cottage is significant as a good example of the Tudor revival style by Bixler and Bain, and lists the following character-defining features. The cross-gabled roof system with sloping eaves, a compound floor plan, horizontal and vertical boards in the gable apexes, louvered vents in the front gables, an old brick chimney, multi-paned casement windows, a partial width porch, and stucco walls. I'll just show a few photos of each character-defining feature. So we have the cross-gabled roof system with the sloping eaves, and I'm referring to those areas circled in red that extend beyond the eave of the main house. A compound floor plan with multiple volumes and cross gables. Horizontal and vertical boards in the gable apex, and again, apex is just that triangle between the eave. So we have, it's a little tricky, all painted white, but you can see there's wood boards, rough-hewn wood boards, and stucco. And this feature continues throughout the house on the other elevations as well. An old brick chimney, you can see on the plan, old brick, that notation there. It has since been stuccoed over, but originally it was brick. Multi-paned casement windows. Again, you can see the plan there. We're going to talk about this a little bit more when I discuss integrity. There has been a slight change to the windows, but they are nonetheless multi-paned casement windows. And then the partial width porch, which is depicted on the original plans as well. And stucco walls, which have that classic stucco texture. So our code has the following language when we determine whether or not it's eligible for the inventory. It needs to represent at least one theme in the context statement. It needs to retain substantial integrity. It should be a minimum of 50 years old, and it should meet at least one of the following four criteria on the right. So A, B, and C are checked. And for D, move to the right side of the slide, and I've highlighted it, or outlined in green criterion 3, and I'll talk about this one a little closely. So this has some or statements, and we believe it meets 2 of the 3 here. So criterion 3 is embodies the distinctive characteristics of a type, period, region, or method of construction, or represents the work of a master or a creative individual, or possesses high artistic values. And it has to be a good example of an architectural style, going back to A. So A there is the sub-bullet here. So we believe that the cottage checks the boxes as a Tudor Revival home and by Ernest Bixler and Miles Bain. So it's the first 2 points, and not the third, the high artistic values one. As a Tudor Revival cottage, the resource does not need to be the first Tudor Revival cottage in Carmel, nor the last, nor the only, nor the best, or the most exceptional example of the style, simply a good one. And we'll talk more about what is good in a moment. And there's no question that Ernest Bixler and Miles Bain are masters locally. Ernest Bixler lived in Carmel for 50 years, designed and built around 80 homes in Carmel in a range of styles, not just Tudor. And then, fascinatingly, he served as Carmel's postmaster from 1940 to 1951. And the Olaf House, dating to 1933, is an example of his early work of conforming to Carmel's cottage aesthetic. We only have, it looks like, 6 or 7 Bixler designs on our inventory currently of all that work that he did. One there is a Tudor, so this one pictured is the other Tudor Bixler design that we happen to have listed. It has some similarities with the Olaf House. And then Miles Bain, the builder who rebuilt the home in 1940 to Bixler's plans, he did a small addition in the rear in 1941, and he's probably best known for overseeing the construction of Frank Lloyd Wright's Walker House. So once you determine whether or not a home is significant, you look at its integrity. Integrity is defined as the authenticity of the resource's physical identity, evidenced by the survival of characteristics that existed during the resource's period of significance. So there are 7 aspects: location, design, setting, materials, workmanship, feeling, and association. And the staff report gives an analysis of this. Just quickly, we believe that the Olaf House does retain substantial integrity despite the fact that there have been changes over time. Those changes appear limited to compatible changes and/or removable replacements or removable alterations. It's still in the same location. It still has its Tudor Revival design and its original roof configuration, still located in a residential setting. It retains its original stucco, wood window frames, stone porch, stone front path, stone beams, exposed eaves on the porches. And then in terms of integrity of feeling, it retains the physical features that convey its historic character, a 1930s cottage. And then that last one, that 7th one, association, is only applicable if it's significant for another reason, events or people, which this one is not. Just quickly, there have been alterations in the past couple of years. These are the alterations. So there's now a low iron front fence, a stucco arched arbor, the windows have been replaced, there's a cedar shake roof, there's been stucco and stone put over the original brick chimney, the doors have been replaced, there's now a stone driveway, more stone pathways, a driveway gate, and a rear deck. And it's a mix. Some have been permitted, some not. The green ones are permitted, and then the applicant let me know that the door replacement as well, they received city approval. So when the windows came to the city to be replaced, a historic evaluation should have been done at that time. Alas, it was not. We're here now. The planner is no longer with staff to consult with, but I would imagine that 2020 being COVID, it was an oversight. I've provided here the original plans so you can see how closely the home today resembles what was there in 1933. You still have the same roof lines, the detailing in the gables, the multi-paned casement windows, the front porch. And we can come back to these if you have any question about what's original and what's not. So we have received 2 second opinions, one from Dr. Anthony Kirk received in late November, and one from Kent Seavey received late December. We did have our city consultant review the second opinions, and she does not wish to change her finding, having reviewed them. And then again, just last week, we reached out again to discuss the window replacements, which were not immediately evident to staff that they had been approved to be replaced. But our consultant would ask the board to consider if having new windows has more impact on the integrity of the building than the massing, the roof line, and the wall materials. And considering that all of the window openings remain intact, windows haven't been moved or made bigger or filled in, the panes themselves could, in theory, be replaced. And then lastly, we'll consider tonight if a house should retain most aspects of integrity, but it does not need to retain all 7. And then just quickly, what is a Tudor in Carmel? The label Tudor has been assigned to some 45 buildings on our inventory with construction dates ranging from 1905 to 1940. And then just in case anyone is confused, our DPR form says Tudor Revival, but the inventory says Tudor. What's Tudor? What's Tudor Revival? We're all talking about the same thing here. A quick Google search says Tudor Revival is just sometimes referred to in the US as Tudor. But if you really want to be speaking about Tudor, you'd be speaking about buildings built in the 1400s and 1500s. So this confusion about Tudor versus Tudor Revival is insignificant. And as you know, our current historic context statement doesn't have style sections for anything in the early 20th century. So we don't have a dedicated Tudor style section in the context statement. So we turn to Virginia McAllister's book, A Field Guide to American Houses. And here you can see photographs of the highest style, best examples of Tudor in the United States. And I'll just let you have a moment to look at these. You'll see prominent gables, brick, half timbering, stucco, and chimneys. A few more for you here. And I can pass the book around if you'd like. So while most of those are probably mansions we'll never see in Carmel, these 3 photos are in the group. So I'm showing you everything in the book here for the Tudor style. And these are 3 I'm just pulling out just to show that not every Tudor needs to hit every single feature of the style. So you won't see half timbering on any of these. You won't see, a sloping roof on every single one. It's a mix. These are the more vernacular, the simpler examples. So this book, Field Guide to American Houses, this is her definition of the Tudor style. And I've just bolded the features that our house here that we're talking about tonight definitely has. So in bold, it is side gabled, it has a prominent front-facing gable, has tall, narrow windows, it has multi-pane glazing, and it has an entry porch. There's really no question that it has these features. And then we're here tonight to discuss the trickier parts, right? So in green, I've highlighted the features that we can talk about. Does it or doesn't have these features? So in green, she says a steeply pitched roof. I would argue that it has 2 elongated roof slopes that we saw today on the site visit. And then she says they have massive chimneys. I misspelled prominent, but it has an exterior chimney. And then wall timbering, I would argue it has a variation on the idea, right? It's we have rough-hewn boards with stucco in the gable apexes. So it's a variation on half timbering. And then I would just offer that a local interpretation of Tudor need not include every possible Tudor feature, and our small lot sizes here naturally result in modest, simple designs. And the Olaf House does contain sufficient architectural character to be considered a good example of the Tudor style as viewed within our local context. And cottages like this Olaf House reflect our early 20th century history, which is our formative years, and our architectural chronology. So tonight, our recommendation is to adopt a resolution, which you have as attachment 1, adding the Olaf House located at Camino Real 4 northwest of 11th to the inventory. Alternatively, you can certainly determine that this property is ineligible for listing, and I've written up a resolution for that as well, and you can adopt specific findings as to why, and that will be included in the resolution, and it will also be included in our determination of ineligibility. And I do believe we have the applicant's representative to give presentation as well.
Thank you, Catherine.
Yes.
So Catherine,
Yes.
what was the unpermitted work that was done? Explain.
So it's been a mix under the current owners. In green, definitely permitted. And then I've just been informed that the doors, so that second red bullet, were also approved via email in 2020, circa 2020. So what was unpermitted was the putting stucco and stone over the brick chimney, putting down stone driveway, stone pathways, installing a driveway gate, and then adding a rear deck or extending a rear deck. Any other questions?
On the door replacement, was it a like-kind door, or do we know?
It was not in kind. Let me show you the plan. Where are my plans? Well, I'll show you the door that's there now. You'll see it's a partially glazed. There's wood on bottom, glazing on top, kind of like in a French door style. I'm so sorry to be flipping through, but I'll go back to the plans. It was a wood plank door. Here we go. So can you see that on kind of the left? A wood plank door with iron hinge straps. So it was not in kind.
And that window that has all the little panes.
A stained glass window replaced. It's a faux stained glass window now.
It's a faux.
Mm-hmm.
Was the original door rectangular or was it curved at the top?
Rectangular. I think, yeah, rectangular.
Any other questions?
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Can we hear from the owner's representative now?
Thank you. I'll digress 1 second about Mickey Muning since Member Dyer mentioned it. I did a lot of approvals for projects for Mickey, which was most interesting because the contractors afterward would say to me, how am I supposed to attach metal and glass and wood at a single point on this house in his roof design? So Mickey was not bound by the conventions of construction requirements. And he was an interesting fellow, I'll tell you. He was fun to work with. Anyway, we're not here about Mickey Muning.
I hope you come to the May 11th.
Yeah, I'd love to. I could share a few colorful stories about Mickey and his projects.
Yeah.
So in fact, who was the guy who was his assistant? I can't remember. I think he's passed away now.
Yeah, Tim Brackett or something.
Yeah, he lived in Big Sur in the hills and rode a mule to work because he couldn't drive to his house. He would ride a mule down the hill to Highway 1 where he parked his car, and then he would drive to the Mickey's office from there. Yeah, but fun. Anyway, thank you, Anthony Lombardo, on behalf of the applicant. Maureen's kind enough to put up my PowerPoint. Which, if I don't screw it up, is it that forward one? No, I screwed it up. Oh, there we go. Okay, so Catherine and I have a disagreement on what the important factors are here. And let me start with the National Register, which is the Bible, so to speak, of historic determination that the city's ordinance follows. And what's important is in this section, in the definition of what a distinctive characteristic of a home is, it says, to be eligible, the home must clearly contain enough of the characteristics to be, and this is the important part, a true representative of a particular style or type, they say. But the important thing here is it's not, are there some features of the home that couldn't be representative of a style of home, but it must be, if you will, the dominant style of the characteristic of the home. So you could say this is truly, in this case, as alleged by the city's consultant, a Tudor revival cottage. So from the book that Catherine mentioned earlier, there's a list of identifiable features of what a Tudor revival cottage consists of. And as you can see, these are the major ones, none of which are present here. There is not a steeply pitched roof. There is not crossed gables. There's not decorative half timbering. There's not a prominent, there's a chimney, but it's certainly not a prominent chimney. There were not narrow multi-paned windows, and an entry porch is minimal. I'll show you some examples in a minute. Overhang on the gables was minimal or non-existent. It's literally a few inches, as you saw today, and there is no second story. There's no parapeted or Flemish gables, and as Commissioner Pomeroy asked, there's no art. The doors were not arched. The entry doors were not arched. Mr. Seavey, Mr. Seavey, who is the peer reviewist that we retained, and the city, it sounded like, is retaining to work on your new context statement and has prepared one of your prior context statements, identified the home as what's called a minimal traditionalist style home. And that is because the home has a low or intermediate pitched roof. It's small in size, is single story. There's little or no roof overhang on the house. Has multi-pane double hung windows, and had them before. Minimum amount of added architectural detail. And then he describes the gable type and all of the gable ending as representative of that style of home, which is not the same as a Tudor revival home. What's important is that this style of home is not listed in your historic context statement as a style which is entitled to historic protection or preservation. So Mr. Seavey and Dr. Kirk both identified this home as a style of home which is not Tudor revival. And if we go to the next pictures, so here are some examples of some of the listed Tudor style buildings, many of which are in the commercial district, by the way, but some are in the residential as well. So I would say for a couple of these, there's no question that Mr. Bixler knew what a Tudor revival home or Tudor building looked like, because he was the builder of this one. The Enchanted Oaks building was Mr. Bixler's design. You'll notice, as we saw in the next door neighbor's house today on our tour, the clear Tudor style elements, the steeply pitched windows, or steeply pitched roof, the large multi-pane windows, and the timbering. The Weaver's studio, the distinctive roof, half timbering. I guess that's pronounced D.O. building, was a Murphy building, clearly same. This building, I would assume, has been altered drastically over the years, but it was listed as a Tudor revival style, again, by the tall, big chimney, massive chimney, the tall, sleepily pitched roof. This said Sadie's in your original, but now I think it's Portobella's restaurant, I believe, but same style. I've never heard of this one before, Outlands, but again, giant, massive chimneys, steep roofs.
That's Flanders Mansion.
Oh,
I think it's fine.
it doesn't look like that now. I don't think. That makes sense why it's 80 acres. Here's a home, again, that steep roof, the windows in the second floor, the timbering. This one is a Google Earth picture, not very good. You can tell the chimney dominates the front. Again, steep pitch roof, second story. This is another Bixler Tudor style, 2 stories, very steep roof, rounded entry porch there. Mayberry house, massive chimney in the front, timbering, steep pitch roof, and then there's us. So the front door is not now, nor has it ever been timbered. There's no steep roof. The chimney is not a prominent architectural feature. The rounded entry gate is a recent addition of the current owner, and you would never say this would share any of the stylistic elements, or as the statute or the guideline or the handbook says, are the predominant features of this house Tudor? And the answer is clearly no. This is what Mr. Seavey's report contained as a definition of the building, which is called minimal traditional style. That far better exemplifies this house. It was popular from 25 to 50, 1 story, narrow, low to medium pitched roof, both what this has, narrow eaves, this has, windows which were double hung at the time the house was built. The cabinetry, I don't know what the inside of the house looks like. Wall cladding being mixed, which is exactly what this house, there's no half timbering whatsoever. There's different mixture of wall cladding, which is according to this definition from the book that the book, the McAllister book, that's what this is from, that staff mentioned earlier, and that's what Mr. Seavey and Dr. Kirk said this house is. It's a minimal traditional style house, which bears far more resemblance to this style than it bears any resemblance to a Tudor style. Interestingly enough, based on the timing that the house was built, the last paragraph states that this was a reaction to the fact that during the Depression, people weren't able to afford larger, expensive, fancier houses. So this style was adopted in order to allow houses to mimic some European styles without spending the money it took to actually build an actual European style or Tudor home in this type. So the experts, I never saw, if there was one, any response from Ms. Clovis as to why the house would not be considered minimal traditionalist style, as Dr. Kirk and Mr. Seavey said. But here we are. So the windows were replaced as staff described earlier. These are not Tudor style, tall, narrow windows. This is the front door emails that I referred to earlier. This is an email from the client asking if a permit were needed to change out the front door. And the planner said that's fine with planning, and then the client says no permit then. And the staff, I don't know if they ever responded, but they didn't say it was illegal. These are the window replacements that were permitted by the city. So we get back to the city's historic contact statement. Does this house embody a distinct characteristic of the style of home? As you know, the National Register requires that it be the predominant style of the home. I don't believe, and neither did Mr. Seavey or Dr. Kirk believe that to be the case. And then does it represent the work of a master? So we discussed Mr. Bixler and Mr. Bain. So master is a defined term, and it's described as a person who's recognized, generally recognized for greatness in his field or her field. But also, it says that the house must, or in this case house, must express a particular idea or theme in his or her craft. Frank Lloyd Wright house, the Walker House being, a prime example of something like that, or the Murphy houses. So does this house express a particular theme that Mr. Bixler adopted for his work? I think clearly the answer is no. We saw at least two Tudor buildings that Mr. Bixler built, which are clearly Tudor. He built this one, which is clearly not Tudor. It's a minimal traditionalist style house, which he is neither known for, and in fact there are several of his homes, but in the historic context statement, but none of them are a Bixler style or anything that he did. Of additional interest this is the city's historic context statement, which appears to say that Bixler's era of preeminence, or prominence, I guess would be the better term, was from the 1940s and 50s. This house was built far earlier and is not associated with the style of any of the other homes that Bixler built that are listed. Miles Bain, as you heard staff say, repaired the house after it burned down and added that small addition at the rear of the house. So Mr. Bain didn't have anything to do with the house other than repairing it after rebuilding the fire damage after the tragic fire. I assume something terrible happened there when it burned down, but Bain's association was a repair of the existing house using the existing plan. So Mr. Bain is recognized as a prominent builder, but there's nothing about this house that has any style that he either adopted or invented. He was apparently a good builder, but that's pretty much it. So in closing, we would respectfully request that the HRB concur with Dr. Kirk and Mr. Seavey that the style of this home is predominantly not a Tudor revival home. The photos that Catherine put up from the McAllister book are pretty clearly indicative of the style of a Tudor home. This isn't that. And so we would like to have the HRB adopt the staff's second suggestion, which is to conclude that the home built in 1933 is not and does not contain predominantly the style characteristics of a Tudor revival home. It's a minimal traditionalist home, as described by Mr. Seavey, which is not one that either Mr. Bixler or Mr. Bain are famous for building. It's a style that was a reaction, I guess, to the economic circumstances of the 1930s and is not included as a recognized historic style in your context statement as it exists today. Thank you.
We want to open it to the public before we speak. Anyone else like to speak to this topic? Seeing no one out here in the audience. Anyone online, Leah?
Not seeing anyone online.
Thank you. So let's bring it back.
We have
Oh, there's someone here. Mel?
Thank you, Vice Chairwoman and Board. I did have a Mel Alborn, interested resident. I had a question about a minimal traditionalist style. I see that there are several properties in the inventory with that style. And would you please explain about the historical context statement versus the inventory? I know that there are many Tudor properties in the inventory, and I'm understanding from discussion that they are part of the historical context statement. But could you please explain the minimal traditionalist style and its absence, if that's what I'm to understand, its absence from the statement? Thank you.
Catherine?
Catherine?
So as you recall, the historic context statement was updated in 2022, and it was a 20-year extension update, and it covered architectural styles we see here in Carmel during the 1966 to 1986 period. That was the 20 years we were given a grant fund to work on, and the minimal traditionalist style is one of those styles. So it's in the current context statement, and the board's familiar with it. You have listed minimal traditional styles on the inventory, and so I did not focus on that in my presentation so much, because I think you've been familiar with that style, but certainly if there are questions about it, if you would like to talk about it more, we can. Mr. Lombardo mentioned double hung windows, and this house has casement windows, and also the time frame. This home would be a bit early for that style. What we have in our context statement, the style doesn't technically start until a few years later. But again, styles don't start and end strictly at a certain year, so that's for you to consider. But staff felt that this was not at all a minimal traditional building. It's early and it doesn't have the minimal traditional features. And then in terms of the Bixler and Bain, we feel that this cottage represents the early phase of the work. And this was a cottage for, I believe, a clergyman, so it's going to be much simpler than our prime downtown buildings. Any other questions?
Okay. Thank you. All right. So now can we bring it down to us and start discussing this? Anyone have anything to say before we vote?
I'm rather confused on this style issue. And the Seven Arts building has not been altered, and nor has Sunset Center. And those are considered, I guess, Tudor buildings. Prime examples in my mind. And so if this is a minimal traditional house, but it hasn't been presented as such by the city's consultant, isn't it worthy under the minimal traditional stance? That's something that just kind of throws everything up in the air, but as I say, I'm very confused about the style issue. I mean, it doesn't have to have, deep overhangs. These are things that, to my understanding, these are things that can be there, but they don't have to all show up.
You have anything, Eric?
I guess I would just, I kind of agree with you. I mean, there's some minimal traditional features of this house that are now, actually it's become more Tudor with the window replacements, I think, because the horizontality of the original windows is actually a characteristic, one of the main characteristics of the minimal traditional style. So I think that's one of the reasons why Kent Seavey was kind of putting that in that basket. And correct me if I'm wrong, Catherine, but the minimal traditional style does tend to borrow from other styles. So that's, one of the things that could be looked at. But again, I kind of agree that it maybe needs to be reevaluated because it's not purely Tudor, certainly.
You have anything, Kathy?
Well, it sounds like it could be on the register under either style. And also, it doesn't have to be the best example of that style.
I really came into this fairly neutral, I think, and I agree. I don't think I'm too worried about whether it's Tudor or minimal traditional. I think that it has enough characteristics, maybe of both, that it's worth determining as historic. However we determine what style it is, I think it hits a lot of the criteria, enough of the criteria to be considered historic. So that's kind of where I'm at. Anyone else? All right. Are we ready to make a motion?
If it would help the board facilitate your deliberation, we could put up the section of the context statement that addresses minimal traditional, if you would find that helpful.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
So as Catherine mentioned earlier, this was part of the Phase 1 update, correct? Phase 1 update that was recently completed. So we've introduced some photographs of this particular style, and this is a preview of what the Phase 2 will also accomplish. And then these are the character defining features that are listed in the context statement.
The sloped roof seems to be a very major consideration for me anyway, in terms of whether it's Tudor versus minimal traditional. Uncommon in minimal traditional, I would assume. And the chimney, the treatment on the chimney was disturbing to me, but the fact that it could be removed was an issue that made it important that it could be historic because it could be removed. Okay. Any other comments? All right. Anyone like to make a motion?
All a little bit on the fence.
I'll make a motion. I'll make a motion that we consider it historic, and based on the information that Catherine gave us, and the fact that I think that whether it's completely Tudor or not, it's has enough defining features of Tudor to be considered historic.
I'll second the motion.
Okay. Roll call.
Board Member Dyer,
No.
Board Member Goodhue,
Yes.
Vice Chair Hall,
Yes.
Board Member Pomeroy,
Yes.
Okay, so the motion passes to add the property to the city's local historic inventory. The applicant does have 10 business days if they wish to file an appeal and go before the city council.
All right, thank you. Director's report. We move on to director's report.
So wanted to let you know that we're going to be making some tweaks to our email communication. I know most of you are on the city email address. Our meeting invitations still include personal emails and city emails. So we're going to be going in and cleaning that up so it just shows your city email. So just want to give you a heads up that we're going to be making that change. And I think we still need to kind of work on some of Board Member Pomeroy's access issues. So that is in the works, and I'll be reaching out to you to set up an appointment with our IT department.
Can I join that? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
So we really want to complete this transition from your personal emails over to your city-issued emails.
So when you send out information, it'll only go to the city email?
Correct. And I believe we set up yours to automatically forward. So you should be all set.
Okay, good. That
Yeah.
doesn't change.
That does not change.
Okay.
Yeah. And then also just a couple other quick updates. So we did submit our housing plan to the state on April 11th, which was this last Thursday. We are waiting to get our formal letter of certification from them. We're hoping that it comes today, but we did get it in, and they did indicate that they can certify it as written. So we're really happy about that. In other news, we do have a capital improvement program going on right now that for the repainting of the Sunset Center's north wing. So the city has budgeted $300,000 for some repainting of both the Sunset Center as well as Harrison Memorial Library. So Sunset's underway, Harrison will be next. So nice to just see that investment in some of our historic buildings and maintaining them. The project also included some remediation for lead and asbestos. So good to get those hazardous materials kind of out of the community.
I'm assuming that the colors haven't changed?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. And then just a follow-up on the Gretel and Hansel garage. It did go before the Planning Commission on March 13th, and they did approve the garage. So that project is moving forward. I thought I had one more thing, but it's escaping me now, so that concludes the director's report.
All right. Thank you. Anything else before we close?
I have, I wanted to add a possible future agenda item, and maybe it needs to be, we could obviously communicate about it more, and you can communicate with the Borises, but there was a discussion at the Comstock ad hoc committee, or whatever you want to call it, about having the city make a proclamation about Comstock and some recognition of him. And I think it'd be nice for the Historic Resources Board to make a recommendation to the City Council to do that. And so maybe that could come up at the next meeting in May so that we could move that to council in June and get it done before the July events.
Great. Okay. Adjourned. Thank you.
Oops, what was that?